Hi everyone, today we are going to discuss a new poem from our Flamingo book, that is Keeping Quiet, by Pablo Neruda. And as you know, Pablo Neruda was born in Chile, that is in South America, in that continent. Uh, the language there is Spanish, because that was perhaps a Spanish colonial nation. So the prominent language is Spanish, and it is pertinent to mention here that this poem was actually composed in Spanish. Later it was translated into English by Alistair Reid, a Scottish poet of prominence. And the real name of this poem in Spanish was A Colors. I might not be pronouncing the word properly, A Colors. And the poem has been taken from his collection of poems, Extravaganza, or something like that, which means roaming around or roaming beyond the allowed boundary. So it seems that in his collection of the poems in this particular book, he is thinking about the world outside. He is not focused in his own locality. And in this poem also we will be actually getting a glimpse of his world philosophy, his own philosophy. And as you know, he was a person who was closely associated in politics, and he was also a pacifist, as it's known. He had already received two prominent peace prizes before this poem was composed in the year around 1950. The one is Lenin Peace Prize, and another was International Peace Prize, and perhaps he also got or received a Stalin Peace Prize. So it shows his character and what kind of person he was. And it is also known that our poet Pablo Neruda was actually inclined towards communist philosophy, communist ideology. And due to this ideology, actually he had to hid himself in a different nation when a warrant was issued against him, arrest warrant was issued. And after he returned, when the government changed in Chile, he returned his own place to his nation, the Isle Niger, where he actually composed all these poems. Though he was a poet earlier too, but these poems which are in Extravaganza are composed after 1944, after his arrival from his, you can say, hiding. And he had by the time observed two world wars. When the first world war occurred, he might be little 10 or 12 years, because he was born in 1904. But when it was 1944, the world war was already going on. And when this poem was written, ultimately in 1950, America had already dropped its nuclear bomb over Japan, and the post-war effects were observed everywhere. The aftermath of the world wars were seen everywhere, and people were actually quite distressed after the world wars, and those things can be traced here in this poem also. Though this poem is about introspection, thinking about our own self, our own humankind, but it's not devoid of the war effect. And I will analyze this from both the point of view, from his personal perspective and from his analysis and of the world after the war. So let's watch this video which is running on the screen before we proceed line by line discussion of this poem. Pablo Neruda. You can see here his picture taken from Wikimedia, and this is Chile actually, which is located in the South American continent to the western side. And Extravagaria, okay, it's Extravagaria, not Extravaganto. A Colors was the real title in Spanish. and his real name is Ricardo Eliezer Naphtali Reyes Bosalto, and he died in 1973, as you can see. This is just an illustrative picture, and now we'll begin our discussion. So the poem actually begins with something that you can say heralds or tells about a new beginning and an end of something. That is a juncture, you can say, or it's a point from where things can start afresh. That's why he urges everyone, the reader and the people who are reading his poems, to actually come to a point of unification, come to a place, come to a juncture where we need to forget our past, bury our past, and step forward to our future. And here he mentions about now we will count to 12, and here in the picture you can see count to 12. The clock shows 12, but not necessarily he means to say it is 12 of the dial of a clock. It may be the end of years after 12 months, or it may be just a noon or a midnight, who knows. But he has chosen 12, not 10, not 5, so it may not be just a counting of seconds or minutes. It may have some deeper meaning, and we'll discuss everything. Suppose he meant 12 on the dial of a clock, then what it may indicate here. You can see the hands of the clock are aligned at a single position. They are coincidental one over another. So it may also mean that come to a point, come to such a timing where things would not be in a scattered way, in a messy way. Everything would be in equilibrium, in a balanced manner. Let's not give diverse opinion. Let's not think divergently. Converge at a single place. So this clock may mean 12, everything, each at a single point. He talks about unification. He talks about single-mindedness. Okay, so you can see other clocks, and here you can see this calendar showing December, end of the year, the last month, the 12th month. So after the 12th month, a new year starts, and it may also mean that he wants to tell this, let's, whatever has happened, let it be dumped there, and begin something new, begin something afresh from this new year, or from the 13th one, that is the one. So this may also mean the end of the year. So let the thing that has gone past away, let it pass away, but let's begin something afresh. So these are the two lines on the top. You can see now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. So he urges everyone to keep still, keep silent, sit silent, if possible recline somewhere, take a rest, sit idle, crouch somewhere on a chair, and think over about themselves, introspect. We'll discuss all these things. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Then in the third and fourth line he said, for once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. So on this face of the earth, that means he's thinking globally. He considers himself a global citizen. He is not localized. He is thinking about the human race in total. He wants to actually cover everyone under his philosophy, under his umbrella. So he imagines that no one would be talking in any languages they know. And here languages mean not just the language we people speak. Not, it's not about Spanish or English. He's actually talking about the languages which actually creates division, language which instigates violence, and language which actually persuades other to fight, and language which is the reason for this hatred and the global war. So he might be indicating here the language used by the leaders, or you can say warmongers, who are actually belligerent, want to fight and prove their supremacy over others. So he dislikes here, he wants that no one should talk in such languages, because language is sometimes the culprit. Language creates division, sometimes more than unification. So he says, let's stop for 1 second. Let's stop for 1 second. He actually wants that everyone sits back silently, but he says here, for 1 second. You know, 1 second is remaining silent for just 1 second won't work. I'll tell what kind of figure of speech is used here. So he's just let's stop for 1 second. If you cannot sit silently for a longer span of time, just sit for a second, sit silently for 1 second, and not move our arms so much. He says that don't move our arms. So what does this word arms mean here? It may just mean on the literal sense, or whatever written on the prima facie, on the surface. You can say that it's just about our hands, arms, which we use for working. But this may again mean, this is a point I will discuss. This may again mean the picture you can see below, that is weapons, armories, artilleries. So he's urging, let's not move. Let's not move our arms. So he's saying, don't overdo, don't work too much, don't rush or run after money, accumulation, wealth. Sit back, relax. But at the same time, he might be saying, don't move the artilleries, weapons, and the tools of warfare. So as I have already told you that this poem may have a deeper meaning and may have influence of the words. So when he says to count up to 12, he might be actually trying to say or trying to convey that we should wait till the ceasefire is declared, wait till the ceasefire, that is count up to 12. After 12 we'll have a ceasefire, and then don't spoil the fraternity, brotherhood of the world by giving irrelevant speeches, instigating speeches. So that is the second meaning. And the third meaning, he might be saying that don't move your weapons, your missiles, your bombs, your tanks, all these things. So as you can see in the picture, he's urging people not to speak in any language, and he's also asking people to sit back and relax and not work too much. Then in the second stanza, it would be an exotic moment without us, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. So he says that this is not only the wars which has actually spoiled our balance, or we are not poised properly due to war only. It is also due to ourselves too, because we are running after money. We are the people who want to see our nation prosper. We are the people who want rapid economic growth rather than development of a lot of things, human development index, our happiness index. There are a lot of things, but we are the people who are actually running after money. We have a hedonistic attitude, a materialistic attitude. We want to enjoy our life to the fullest. We want to become richer and richer through accumulation of this wealth, and for this we are working too hard. We are overworking, we are overdoing, So he urges it would be an exotic moment, it would be a beautiful moment without rush. Try to sit silently, sit idle, and try to enjoy how exotic it could be without rush and without engines. In the original poem, it's something like locomotive or something like that. So without engines on the surface may mean engines of the cars and vehicles which we drive, and engine may mean the engines of the fighter planes and all these things. So it may have another meaning beyond the surface. So without rush, without engines, it would be an exotic moment. So he's asking everyone to stop all these things. We would all be together in a certain strangeness, and if these things happen, we all be at a single point where a positive discussion is possible, where we can come up with newer ideas, with innovative things, because we don't have time to think about ourselves, about others. We have become self-centered, we have become selfish. So if these things happen, then perhaps in the beginning it may seem that these are just some strange things are going to happen, but this strangeness would later prove to be beneficial for all of us. Now the third stanza, which is actually very much important from your examination point of view, because so many things may be asked from this stanza only. What is this? Fisherman in the cold sea would not harm whales. So he just says that fishermen, not all are fishermen, and not that all the people have ships and yachts and boats to catch whales. But he says fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales. So whale fishing was prevalent from 1700 till the middle of 1900, and a lot of whales were killed for various purposes, and as we know that it was one of the prime contributor to the GDP of American nations at a time. But later, when people were actually sensitized and people knew, when you can see outcries were heard, these things came to a halt, and now the whale fishing has declined sharply, and numbers are increasing as per survey reports. But this whale fishing, this was a you can say industry where only some corporate people enjoyed, and they could afford to do all these things, then arranging, managing all these things in the sea. And what about this cold sea? Cold sea, there is not a single cold sea on this world, but yes, there are places where cold current flows, and the water there might be little cooler in comparison to other places. And such is a place that is you can see to the west part of South America, that you can say Humboldt current or Peru current, which is a cold current. And maybe he is mentioning here about the Peru current or Humboldt current because he lived in that part, and particularly after 1944 he lived very close to the western coast. That's why he might have observed this kind of whale fishing there, and he's mentioning there on the surface. But as you know, this poem was composed in 1950, and in that year, not in that year, perhaps 2 or 3 years before, 1947, perhaps Cold War had already started. And in 1947, Cold War had started, and the world was divided into two parts. One that was led by USSR, and another America. And those who were not aligned to any of these two were known as Third World, and Chile was also definitely in the Third World. And the Cold War was threatening everyone with their future possibility of Third World War. That's why Cold Sea may again mean the vastness of the war that is imminent in the Cold War situation, because every nation was busy accumulating their weapons, particularly nuclear weapons, which was threatening everyone. And that was in the cold sea. Fishing whales, whale, as you know, is the largest animal on earth, and nuclear weapon may be the largest weapon at the time until now on this earth that's possible. So who knows, he might be indicating a nuclear weapon warhead. You can just guess. It's my own view, my own analysis. He might be thinking, because as I told you, he actually saw both the world wars, and he had an inclination towards some nation, some ideology. He was inclined to communist ideology. Later he corrected himself and gave some neutral views. But however, he was a diplomat, and he was very closely associated with the politics. So he knew all these things, all these developments. So this may mean this one also. And now you can see here, and the men gathering salt. In the first two lines, in this third stanza, he mentioned about fishermen who had owned, possessed yachts and ships, fishing ships, fishing nets, and you can say the things of paraphernalia or tools required to kill whales. But here you see the contrast, the opposite thing. Now he's not talking about the elite class or the corporate class or class of the haves. He's talking about have-nots. And the men gathering salt would look at his hot hands. There is spelling mistake. Excuse me, it is not H-O-T hot, it is H-U-R-T hot. That means injured hands. Would look at his injured hands. So if everyone remains silent and thinks over about themselves, then the whale fishing will stop at one side, and at another side even the poorest of the society would also get time to look at their own health and hygienic condition. They will also get time to recover the injury inflicted upon their own body due to occupation they have compelled to choose, like salt gathering. So this paragraph sometimes is analyzed from a communist point of view. The first two lines, the fishermen may represent the actually elite class people, corporate class people, well-to-do people who actually control the economy of the world, and then those labor class people, the labor section, the poorer section, downtrodden section, who have been mentioned here as salt gatherers. So they are representative of the poor people, salt gatherer. And then it changes the gear. He talks about the wars directly. Till now he was mentioning things which we need to do, which we should do, what our obligations were. But now he's open with his ideology, his philosophy. You can see here, those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivor. So he's talking about his people who actually started the war, who are the real cause behind all the wars. So he talks about preparing green wars, and this war, green war is something confusing, because greenery cannot come to war unless we harness the potential of our nature for our quick development, quick growth, economic growth. Then there might be a competition which may be mentioned here, green war. And again, this may mean devastation of our nature, our environment, our ecosystem. This may mean green war. And some people have associated this with biological weapons, because greenery or green means something living, something that has life, and biological weapons, as you know, the SARS-CoV is now spreading and has taken the shape of a pandemic. Likewise, that was also not a unknown concept at the time. 1950s, people had started thinking about these chemical weapons, biological weapons, and all these things. So maybe those prepare green wars with gas, you know. In the Second World War time, gas chambers were used, employed to kill people, particularly in Germany. So gas chamber you can see, and then wars with fire. Fire means arms and ammunition, bombs, artillery, and the most prominent one was that little boy and fat man kind of weapon, that is a nuclear warheads. Victory with no survivors. And as you know, all those world war ended in what? No material gain, no gain of boundary, nothing. They conquered things for nothing, they only lost. As it is well said that in wars there is no winner. So nobody won, only the lost people. So likewise, victory with no survivors. So in these kind of wars, the victory is such that there is no survivors are left. And those who are actually part of these wars would put on clean clothes when everything becomes silence, everything remains stagnant, nothing moves, nothing works. Then the wars will also stop once we stop thinking about speaking in different languages and gathering some irrelevant ideas, some enmity among ourselves. Then the war will also definitely come to an end someday, and at that time what will happen? Would put on clean clothes. People who are engaged in war, people who have been directly involved in the war as armsmen, or who had been there leading in the front or planning the wars, they will all put on clean clothes, because things will change, and walk about with their brothers. So this will provide them an opportunity, a chance to walk about with their brothers. Here brother may mean their real brother, their cousins, and it may again mean that if wars end on this world, then we will develop some kind of fraternity, brotherhood among ourselves throughout the world. So we will have a chance to meet with our people with a different perspective, with showering of our love and fraternity, and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. And again, in the shade, shade is something that is giving you a protection from something. You feel comfortable, your life will change, your life will not be full of rage and anger, it will be cooled. So everyone will feel happier, comfortable under the shade, and there will be no warfare. Doing nothing, and they even don't need to do a lot of things, because life will be simplified if wars are over. So you can see the picture. They are walking under the shades. Now the very important thing which actually the poet Pablo Neruda clarifies here. He has already told us to remain silent, to stop working, to stop speaking. He has urged us not to venture into the seas, not to gather salt, and not to think about wars. Now, if all these things happen, what we all are supposed to do? So he says, what I want should not be confused with total inactivity. He said, what I am saying that doesn't mean that we should be totally inactive. We won't work, we won't go to our workplace. No. He says that total inactivity should not be there. Total inactivity is comparable to death. So he is not asking us to become totally inactive, because total inactivity, if it happens, then that will be associated with death. So he says, with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. Activity is life. Life is activity, full of activities, and activities are actually something which can define your life. I want no truck with death. So I don't want to tell you that by remaining inactive, you live like a dead man. I don't want to truck. I don't want to associate your inactivity with death. Don't die. Don't die. Or don't sleep in your comfortable bed. No. You have to work. You have to work as much as it is necessary to sustain yourself. But don't do things which actually poses threat and danger to other people. If we are not so single-minded, so he says, if we are not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, so this situation, this inactivity, advice of this inactivity would not have arisen in me by my own thought if we were not single-minded, obsessed with this hedonic materialistic attitude. This situation has arisen because we have changed our perspective towards the world. We are rushing after money and wealth. So if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, so to sustain, not only sustain, to enjoy our life, to become richer and richer, this travel has actually snatched away the humanity thing from ourselves, about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, and this is the right time. And now if we are unable to do anything to overcome the mistakes we have done, and for once could do nothing, and if we don't do all these things, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves. So because you are rushing already, and if we don't do, things will not change. We need a huge silence, perhaps. That means huge silence means here thinking about ourselves, introspection, meditation, and analyze ourselves, what we have done in the past, what we are doing. This kind of analysis is possible only when we are silent, when we keep ourselves quiet. So this is called huge silence. This will be asked several times in your examination. Huge silence. What is this huge silence? This is huge silence means stopping everything, every work or every activity that has actually deterred ourselves from moving in the right direction. So we have to think back, we have to think over, we have to introspect, we have to even retrospect, and we have to meditate and know ourselves and know the humankind, know what we are for. That is possible in this huge silence. So he says that everyone has to join this moment and introspect. That is the huge silence mentioned here. A huge silence might interrupt, and huge silence will interrupt. So whatever is going on, we are not able to know ourselves, and this has to be interrupted by huge silence. And what is going on? That is the sadness of never understanding ourselves. We understand ourselves, we understand our self-centeredness, okay, but don't know the true purpose of human being on this earth. This is not about self-centeredness, not about fulfilling our own need. We have to think about others also. We have to think about poor section. We have to think about the overall goodness in everything, in whatever we are doing. So that's why he says only this kind of huge silence, this kind of keeping quiet for a longer period of time by a larger mass will solve this problem of not understanding ourselves. We have misunderstood ourselves. We have misunderstood the real purpose of human being on this earth, of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. And by that we are threatening ourselves with death, and because of this misunderstanding, because of this this situation of not understanding ourselves, we have been forced to the mouth or mouth of the forge, where we are fighting among ourselves and we are killing each other's life. So we are threatening our own life. So again here he says, he takes example, inspiration, he draws inspiration from the earth. Now he says, is it possible really that if we sit silently and don't do anything and things will really change? There is a little iota of doubt whether it will work or not. So he supports his belief with an example, with an evidence, and he says perhaps the earth can teach us. The earth is the greatest teacher, nature is greatest teacher, can teach us, as when everything seems dead. He says, when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. So time comes when the earth seems to be dead. You can see in pictures where the earth in the summer may seem to be dried up, desiccated, no water content is there, grass and plants, foliage, everything is dried up, dead. But what happens after a few months when the season changes, rainy season comes, and then what happens? The whole world is drenched, left with water, and you can see vegetations everywhere. So that is also mentioned here. So he says, now I will count up to 12. He said, now I will count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. So he again reminds the reader, the people, that I have told already what I wanted to. Now don't spoil your time, prepare yourself, and I am counting it for you, 1 to 12. So here it may mean number, or he may be asking us to come to a point where we can think over what we have done to ourselves and to other people. So the poem ends here with these notes, and we'll definitely discuss the figure of speeches used in this poem. There are so many figure of speeches, literary devices used in this poem, which are very important and vital, and that will come in our next video. But you can also identify some smaller figure of speeches and literary devices like alliteration and then repetition and anaphora, all these things. But we will discuss it in a separate video after this. So thanks for watching this video, and if you like this video, you may subscribe to this channel and share it with others, so that students will be benefited with that. Thank you for joining. Thank you again.